How did English become the international language? It is a common knowledge that English is nowadays an international language. Since the appearance of first Anglo-Saxon Old English speaking nation, colonization of German islands and Northern Europe has begun. Approximately 800 years later, since the establishment of the first permanent English-speaking colony in the North America, in 1607, the true globalization of English started. The next big step was the formation of settlements in Australia in 1788 and the following colonization of Oceania. The English language has been established in all of the British or English colonies on all of the 6 continents. The total number of colonized by the British Empire or earlier forms of it countries is more than 60, and therefore they all had an impact on their own cultures and languages. However, before English became an official international language, French started to develop as an international language. But this idea did not work very well, due to the complicated grammatical structures of French. So why English? Because of its simple grammar, because of it already being widespread due to colonization, and because of the English-speaking countries being some of the most developed countries in the world. What are the advantages of having an international language? Approximately 1.5 billion people speak English in the world today, and 30% of the world's population are reasonably competent speaking the international language. Furthermore, an additional 1 billion people are learning it. This makes us think about why so many people want or have to learn English. When something is discovered in one country, it is then shared with the whole world, so there is no need for each country to rediscover the same thing. Therefore, 85% of the scientific, technological, or academic productions in the world today are done in English. International organizations like UN, EU, or NATO, official discourse is always produced in English first, then translated to other languages. The knowledge of English in these organizations is essential. Diplomats and politicians from different countries use English to communicate with each other, as translations are expensive and time-consuming. English has made communication in other countries easier. Nowadays, you can go to almost any country and speak English, and people will understand. You can ask for directions, have a conversation. Who knows, maybe English will save your life someday. Let's take a look at what some tourists in Prague think English is useful for.
How many languages do you speak?
I can speak 3 languages.
What is your native language?
My native language is Armenian language.
Do you know English better than that language?
No.
And do you think knowing English is useful for you, and why?
For speaking with foreigners, because I'm working in international organization.
How many languages do you speak?
Our first language is Spanish. We're from Chile. So our second language is English.
Do you know English better than Spanish?
No. Better.
Do you think English is useful to know?
Absolutely. I worked as a director for a British Institute in Chile for 10 years. So I know English is very important.
Okay. Thank you. That's it.
Okay.
Thank you so much. How many languages do you speak?
I speak 2, English and Norwegian.
And you speak 3?
German. I have 4. French.
French? A little bit? Yes. But English is very important in Norway.
So your native language is Norwegian.
Yes.
And do you think knowing English is useful for you?
Yes. Very
And
much.
why do you think it's useful?
English? Because I think we can use it everywhere, in every country. We can use English.
Thank you very much.
אנגלית פה.
לא מהארץ.
לא מהארץ. אני מהארץ כמו מגורי, אבל אני גרה פה עכשיו. First question, how many languages do you speak?
2.
2 languages. What is your native language? Hebrew. Okay. Do you know English better than Hebrew?
No.
Do you think knowing English English is important and good for you?
Yes.
Why?
I read books in English. I can surf internet.
How many languages do you speak?
3.
Okay. Well, what is your native language? Your first language?
Netherlands.
Dutch.
Do you know English better than your language?
My language is so.
Okay. And do you think English is important for you, knowing English? How
That's
does
very
it help?
important for me.
Why is it important?
Yeah, I like foreign language. I like it. It's just interesting for me.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
In most countries and industries, a knowledge of English is an invaluable asset when gaining jobs and going to universities. An example of a country where the knowledge of English is essential is South Korea. Okay. Do you think English is important and why?
Of course I think English is important because, well, it's an international language, as you know. Yeah.
And English is important in Korea also because lots of companies require us to speak English because they will export some products to other countries. So, yeah, I think.
Do you think English will help you in the future?
Well, it's not actually help, but it's kind of requirement. We need to speak English or know how to write and blah blah blah. We need to be good at English to go to university. If not good one, like any university require us to learn English. So.
Do you know where you're going to university?
Well.
Any idea?
In Korea, well, some.
And you think you'll need English there?
Of course.
Okay.
Did you study English in Korea?
Yes, even though I was in primary school, I started learning English in that age. Well, I was quite late. Like, I started learning English in about 11 years old, and some of my friends started learning English when they were about 8 years old. So even though it's just foreign language, they even don't know how to speak Korean well, but they started learning English, so that's great.
And Leanne, since when did you learn English?
I learned English when I was 9 years old. I started because my sister started also, so I just started with my sister. I think in Korea, even though children in kindergarten learn English, I think parents think that they can learn language very well when they are a child because they can memorize more.
Will English always be the international language? Right now, this question cannot be solved, but this is a topic that is constantly being debated today. In 1997, Nicholas Negroponte of MIT said that Chinese would replace English as the dominant global language by 2008. One of the main debates on the subject is, will Chinese replace English as the international language? There are very solid arguments for both sides on this. On one side, people say that even if Chinese will become more dominant than English, it will not become the new lingua franca, a language used for international communication. The language and alphabet is very different and much more complex than English, so it would be quite hard for many students and people to make the transition. On the other hand, Chinese is the most spoken language in the world, but English is spoken in a lot more countries. On January 17, 2011, an article about China's economic growth was written by McWhorter, a William Simon Fellow at Columbia University. He wrote, "China is poised to become the world's economic leader with the next few decades. But there are those under the impression that this will mean a sea change in the world's linguistic terrain as well. Certainly, any human being who seeks education, influence, or power should be learning Mandarin, right? Wrong. the world's de facto international language will continue to be English. The language spoken by the whole world will not be the one spoken in the country that runs it. A new and hybrid linguistic world order. Disappearance of smaller languages. Story of Maluarendi. The introduction of the international language has solved many worldwide problems. However, it has also had its side effects. The major problem that the introduction of the international language has created today is the disappearance of smaller languages. We learn English in this school and learn all the other subjects in English. Over time, many of you will find yourself thinking, communicating, and even dreaming more in English than in your native language. There are roughly 6,900 languages in the world today, but experts have estimated that 3,000 of them will disappear in the next 100 years. As we see, there are 51 languages in the world today that have only one speaker, so if this person dies, so does the history and culture of the language. With the death of each language, an immeasurably valuable piece of inheritance disappears. One of these languages is the Aboriginal language that Maluarendi speaks. The poor Aborigine is lonely because he has no one to talk to, as he's the only person in the world who understands his language, and there's nothing that can be done to save it.
Oh,